Emily Carter, 26, believed she had found love in Lucas Hawthorne, a charming stranger, but inviting him into her home would unleash a deadly secret, turning trust into a nightmare that ended in murder. Emily Carter, 26, had always been independent. She grew up in a quiet Indiana town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and life moved at a predictable pace. After graduating college, she worked tirelessly to secure her own apartment, a modest but comfortable space that felt like a personal sanctuary. The apartment represented more than just a place to live. It was proof of her hard work, her self-reliance, and the life she had built for herself. Emily had been through heartbreak before, and the memory of a painful breakup still lingered, making her cautious about whom she let into her life. She valued her privacy and her sense of control, traits she believed had protected her for years. Despite her cautious nature, Emily longed for companionship. Even the strongest independent individuals carry a desire for love, and hers was no different. After months of solitude and dedication to her work, she allowed herself to hope that someone could complement her life, not complicate it. She imagined finding a partner who would understand her, appreciate her quiet strength, and bring warmth without disruption. The yearning for connection was subtle at first, a quiet longing she hardly admitted even to herself, but it grew steadily with time. It was in this mindset that Emily first met Lucas Hawthorne at a local cafe. Lucas appeared suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, yet he fit into her life with an unsettling ease. He was charming, confident, and had a presence that drew attention without trying. Emily noticed him immediately, and though she initially kept her distance, their interaction slowly became familiar. Lucas had a way of making ordinary conversation feel meaningful, of listening intently and responding with insight that suggested he understood more than he should. Over the next few weeks, Lucas became a regular presence in Emily's life. He showed up at her favorite spots, always seeming to appear at the right moment. He shared stories about his career, hobbies, and travels, presenting a life that seemed both adventurous and stable. Emily, intrigued and cautiously hopeful, allowed herself to believe he was genuine. She had a deep need to trust, and Lucas seemed to fill that void with effortless charm. Emily invited him into her apartment, thinking it would be a natural step in getting to know someone she cared about. The thought of someone sharing her personal space usually made her nervous, yet Lucas's presence felt safe at first. She noticed his attention to detail, the way he respected her home, and the politeness he displayed that others often lacked. In her mind, his demeanor justified the trust she extended. Emily reminded herself that she was careful. She had considered the risks, weighed her options, and decided that the potential for connection outweighed the fear of disappointment. What Emily did not know was that Lucas carried a dark past she could not see. Beneath his smiles and polished words was a history of manipulation, fraud, and escalating aggression. Every gesture that appeared kind was calculated to disarm suspicion. Every compliment and thoughtful action was designed to cultivate trust. Lucas had perfected the art of blending charm with subtle control, and Emily, despite her intelligence and caution, could not see the signs yet. At night, when Emily lay in her apartment reflecting on the day, she felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. There was something undeniably magnetic about Lucas, a pull that made her ignore minor inconsistencies and fleeting doubts. She told herself that caution was important, but the warmth of connection and the hope of a meaningful relationship clouded her judgment. Her heart wanted to believe that this could be the start of something real, something that would finally fill the loneliness she had carried for so long. Little did she realize that each step she took toward trust was also a step toward danger. Lucas's ability to mask his true intentions meant that Emily's independent instincts, honed over years of careful living, were rendered almost useless. Her sense of security in her own apartment, a place she had always controlled, was now compromised.
The charm that drew her in was also a weapon, silently preparing her for a betrayal she could not yet imagine. Emily Carter's life, so carefully constructed, was about to be shaken in ways she could never anticipate. She had opened her door to someone who seemed trustworthy, someone who seemed kind, but the darkness he carried was closer than she could imagine. In that moment, unaware of the danger that lurked behind every smile and gesture, Emily had unknowingly taken the first step into a nightmare that would challenge everything she believed about safety, love, and trust. Her life, her independence, and her future hung in the balance, vulnerable to a man whose past was as hidden as it was deadly.
Emily's life seemed to take on a brighter hue with Lucas in it. At first, he appeared to be everything she had hoped for in a partner. He was attentive, thoughtful, and present. He arrived at her apartment with small gestures, flowers, coffee, and little notes that spoke of affection. Each act, seemingly innocent, created a sense of comfort and security, and Emily, who had spent years guarding herself, allowed her defenses to relax. She wanted to believe that this was different, that this man was genuine, that perhaps love could arrive without complication. As the days turned into weeks, subtle warning signs began to surface. Lucas avoided detailed conversations about his past. Questions about where he had lived or why he had moved around were brushed off with vague answers or excuses. He skillfully shifted attention back to Emily, making her feel that her curiosity was intrusive or unnecessary. At first, she accepted these deflections, convincing herself that everyone has things they keep private. But slowly, a sense of unease began to grow, a small nagging voice at the back of her mind she tried to ignore. There were other moments that made Emily pause, though she quickly rationalized them. Lucas occasionally checked her phone when she left the room, claiming it was accidental, though the explanations never fully made sense. Minor arguments escalated unnaturally quickly, with Lucas displaying anger disproportionate to the situation. Emily noticed her own responses changing. She became more careful about what she said, more aware of his moods, constantly walking on eggshells. Yet she brushed off the discomfort as normal in a relationship. Friends and family began to notice changes in her behavior as well. Emily, once confident and open, started withdrawing. She canceled outings with friends and avoided family gatherings, citing work stress or fatigue. Those closest to her tried to voice their concerns, but Emily assured them that everything was fine, that she was happy. Deep down, she felt torn. She recognized small red flags, but told herself that she loved Lucas and that love sometimes required compromise. Trusting him felt necessary, even though her instincts occasionally whispered warnings she refused to acknowledge. The trust she extended was not given blindly. Emily was naturally cautious, intelligent, and careful, but Lucas's skill lay in exploiting that very caution. Every act of suspicion was met with reassurance and charm. Every question was redirected, every doubt assuaged with warmth and attention. What Emily perceived as occasional lapses of judgment on his part were in reality deliberate tests of her willingness to overlook danger. His calm demeanor after these minor incidents lulled her into a false sense of security. One evening, Lucas shared what he called a personal crisis. He claimed to be dealing with issues in his life that required temporary shelter and a safe place to stay. He asked Emily if he could stay at her apartment for a few nights until the situation resolved. Her heart urged caution, but her emotions overpowered reason. She wanted to help, to be needed, and she believed that offering him support was an act of love. It seemed reasonable at first. He appeared vulnerable, sincere, and entirely dependent on her trust. In the days that followed, Emily began noticing a shift in their dynamic. Lucas's presence, once charming and comforting, began to feel invasive. He monitored her daily routines with subtle precision, asking where she went, what she did, and whom she spoke to. He questioned her decisions in ways that made her doubt herself.
While she experienced unease, she still rationalized that it was temporary, that his stress might explain his behavior. Love, she believed, required patience and understanding. Her sense of isolation intensified. Lucas encouraged her to spend less time with friends, framing it as a way to protect their relationship. He subtly undermined her support system, ensuring she relied on him for emotional stability. Emily, wanting to believe in his intentions, ignored the gradual erosion of her independence. The charm that had initially drawn her in now acted as a veil, hiding the growing danger behind affection. By this point, the subtle warning signs Emily had noticed at the beginning, the evasions, the minor invasions of privacy, the volatility, had begun to converge into something more alarming. She felt tension she could not shake, yet each attempt to fully acknowledge it was overwritten by a desire to believe in the person she loved. Lucas had woven a carefully constructed reality in which Emily felt both comforted and trapped, unaware that her trust was being manipulated to serve his hidden motives. Emily's caution, which had protected her for years, now collided with a carefully executed pattern of control. Every decision she made, every boundary she relaxed, brought her closer to a dangerous threshold she did not see. The excitement and warmth she once associated with Lucas now carried an undercurrent of tension and fear, foreshadowing the devastating events that were about to unfold. Each day she ignored the warnings, her safety became increasingly compromised, setting the stage for a tragic conclusion that would reveal the true nature of the man she had invited into her home. Emily's decision to let Lucas stay in her apartment was the turning point she could never have anticipated. What had seemed like a simple gesture of kindness quickly transformed into a dangerous situation she could no longer control. Initially, Lucas maintained the same charm that had drawn her to him. He was attentive, polite, and appeared grateful for her generosity. He seemed to care about her, asking about her day, helping with chores, and offering comfort when she expressed stress. At first, Emily felt reassured. She told herself that opening her home was a reasonable act of trust, and that helping someone in need was part of being compassionate. But the comfort was short-lived. Within days, subtle behaviors began to escalate into something far more sinister. Lucas started questioning her routines with increasing intensity, asking where she went, who she spoke to, and why she made certain decisions. It began as casual curiosity, but quickly became intrusive. Emily noticed she was changing her habits, avoiding certain places or postponing plans with friends to avoid potential conflict. At first, she rationalized it as accommodating someone in crisis, but the feeling of unease lingered. Emily also began noticing other signs that something was wrong. Lucas would check her phone when she wasn't looking, sometimes lingering over messages that had nothing to do with him. He would grow agitated over small things, minor disagreements about household chores or casual comments from her friends, and the intensity of his reactions left her anxious and hesitant. Each incident chipped away at her confidence, making her question her own judgment. Isolation became a key tool in Lucas's control. He encouraged Emily to reduce contact with her friends and family, suggesting that others didn't understand their relationship or that outside influences could harm it. Emily, desperate to believe in the man she loved, complied. She began canceling plans and lying about her whereabouts, not out of malice, but out of fear of provoking Lucas's unpredictable reactions. The very independence she had cherished for years was eroding quietly under the weight of his manipulation. By the third night of staying at her apartment, the dynamic between them had shifted entirely. The warmth and attentiveness that had once drawn her in were gone, replaced with an undercurrent of tension and subtle threats. Lucas became unpredictable. He alternated between affectionate gestures and sudden bursts of anger. Emily never knew what to expect, and that uncertainty kept her on edge, always careful to avoid actions that might provoke him. Even as the signs of danger became clearer, Emily struggled to reconcile them with the man she thought she knew. She wanted to believe in the Lucas she had met, the kind, attentive, and charming figure who had first entered her life. She tried to rationalize the inconsistencies, telling herself that stress or past trauma explained his behavior. Her desire to see the best in him clouded her judgment and prevented her from recognizing the escalating threat until it was too late. The apartment, once her sanctuary, began to feel suffocating. Every room carried tension, every corner a potential flashpoint. Emily felt trapped, yet she could not bring herself to leave, convinced that confrontation would worsen the situation, or that Lucas might calm down. The emotional pull of familiarity and the hope of returning to the early days of their relationship kept her tethered, even as danger grew more imminent. Lucas's manipulation extended beyond psychological control. He subtly created opportunities for financial exploitation, making Emily feel obligated to assist him or cover small expenses, each framed as a necessity. Emily complied out of trust and a desire to help, unaware that these small concessions were part of a larger pattern of predatory behavior. At this point, Emily's isolation, fear, and hope had intertwined into a dangerous cocktail. She felt dependent on Lucas for emotional stability, yet increasingly aware that his presence threatened her safety. Each day she endured a mixture of charm and intimidation, a cycle that made it difficult to assess the true level of danger. She was caught between the person she wanted him to be and the reality she could no longer ignore. By the end of the week, Emily's intuition screamed warnings that she could no longer ignore, but fear and hope competed fiercely within her. The choice she had made, to allow him into her personal space, had eroded the boundary between safety and vulnerability. Every precaution she had once taken in her life seemed meaningless now. The apartment, her sanctuary, had been transformed into a trap. The emotional manipulation and control Lucas wielded had set the stage for a terrifying conclusion, one that Emily could not escape and one that would prove deadly before she had a chance to fully react. Emily's life, meticulously organized and carefully guarded, was now dominated by the presence of a man who had infiltrated her trust. Every step she had taken to open her heart had been exploited. The small warning signs she had once ignored had grown into a looming threat that no charm, no reasoning, and no hope could mitigate. Her trust had become a weapon in the hands of someone who intended to destroy her. The unthinkable was approaching, and Emily's world had already begun to unravel.
The night Emily Carter's life ended was quiet at first, almost ordinary. But inside her apartment, a storm had been quietly building, one that would erupt with deadly consequences. Lucas Hawthorne, the man she had trusted, had been planning the moment with a careful precision Emily could never have anticipated. The charm that had first drawn her in had vanished completely, replaced by control, intimidation, and a capacity for violence that only he fully understood. It began with small escalations, each one designed to unsettle her further. He monitored her movements, controlled the apartment's environment, and tested her reactions to subtle threats. Emily, already exhausted from the emotional strain of living with someone so unpredictable, found herself increasingly disoriented. She struggled to make sense of what had once been love, trying to reconcile the man she knew with the man who now dominated her space. As the night progressed, tensions reached a breaking point. Lucas became more aggressive, his behavior erratic and threatening. Emily attempted to maintain composure, hoping to diffuse the situation, but her presence in her own apartment no longer offered any sense of safety. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but every attempt to assert independence was met with intimidation. The very walls of her home, which had been a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The struggle escalated quickly, leaving no time for intervention. Neighbors later reported hearing raised voices, thuds, and sounds of a struggle.
By the time authorities were called, the situation had already turned fatal. When police entered the apartment, they found evidence of a violent confrontation. Signs of a struggle were evident in the living room, furniture overturned, personal items scattered, and subtle traces of blood marking the scene. Emily's body was discovered in a corner of the room, her life tragically cut short by the very person she had allowed into her home. Investigation into the crime revealed the terrifying extent of Lucas's deception. Authorities discovered that he had a history of targeting women, building relationships with charm and manipulation before exploiting vulnerabilities. He had assumed multiple identities, used false employment records, and left a trail of emotional and financial damage in his wake. The murder of Emily Carter, while shocking, was part of a pattern of predatory behavior that he had executed with methodical precision over time. The medical examiner confirmed that Emily had died from blunt force trauma, evidence that the confrontation had escalated quickly and violently. Each detail of the crime scene painted a picture of betrayal and premeditation. Lucas had exploited her trust, manipulated her emotions, and used her own generosity against her. The woman who had been careful, independent, and intelligent had been ensnared by a predator who knew exactly how to exploit human desire for connection. Financial records uncovered during the investigation further illustrated the manipulative pattern. Lucas had subtly extracted resources from Emily, framing small requests as necessary assistance. Each financial concession reinforced her emotional entanglement, making it more difficult for her to recognize the escalating danger. What seemed like minor acts of compliance had been carefully orchestrated to create dependency, leaving Emily vulnerable and isolated when the confrontation turned lethal. Community members were stunned by the revelation. Emily had been known for her independence, her diligence, and her kindness. The knowledge that she had been manipulated and killed by someone she trusted shook the small Indiana town to its core. Neighbors expressed disbelief that someone so cautious could be deceived so thoroughly. Friends and family struggled to reconcile the image of the Emily they knew with the tragedy of her final hours. Lucas's pattern of deception extended beyond Emily. Investigators discovered similar cases in multiple states where women had been manipulated for emotional or financial gain. Emily's murder was the first in which the deception escalated to lethal violence, but it was part of a larger network of predatory behavior that he had executed with methodical precision over time. Emily's story became a case study in the dangers of trust exploited by a manipulative individual. Every decision she made, from opening her heart to letting Lucas stay, had been exploited in a calculated sequence leading to her death. Her life, once full of independence and promise, had been irrevocably changed by one fatal choice, allowing someone into her home without truly knowing who they were. The tragedy of Emily Carter's death resonated far beyond her apartment walls. It became a haunting reminder that charm can mask danger, that love can be weaponized, and that the consequences of misplaced trust can be irreversible. In the end, Emily's life was stolen not by chance, but by deliberate manipulation and cruelty, leaving a community grieving and a world forced to confront the unsettling reality that predators often hide behind the most familiar faces.
The aftermath of Emily Carter's murder left a small Indiana town reeling. Her family struggled to process the devastating news, their grief compounded by the shocking realization that she had been deceived by someone she trusted. They replayed her final days over and over, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong. Every small detail, Lucas's charm, his attentiveness, the way she had welcomed him into her home, was now a haunting reminder of how manipulation can mask danger. Friends who had once seen her as careful and independent now wrestled with guilt, wondering if they could have intervened, if they should have pushed harder when they noticed red flags. Authorities launched a nationwide search for Lucas Hawthorne. Investigators worked tirelessly, piecing together his past, uncovering multiple identities, and tracking patterns of deception. They discovered that Emily was not his first target, and tragically, she would not be the last had law enforcement not acted quickly. Each piece of evidence revealed a man who had perfected the art of seduction and exploitation, using charm as a tool to manipulate and control. His pattern of predation was methodical: identify vulnerability, build trust, isolate the target, exploit financially or emotionally, and escalate to violence if threatened or resisted. The case became a cautionary tale, spreading rapidly online. Articles, social media posts, and local news outlets detailed the story, emphasizing the dangers of allowing strangers into one's personal life without truly knowing them. Emily's story resonated because it was relatable. She was intelligent, independent, and cautious, yet even she fell victim to deception. Her death highlighted how easily trust can be weaponized, and how predators often exploit the very qualities that make someone kind, empathetic, and open-hearted. Emily's apartment, once her sanctuary, was cleared and documented by investigators. Everything in the space told a story of a life interrupted. Her laptop and work materials untouched, personal belongings scattered from the struggle, and subtle traces of violence marking a space that had once represented comfort and independence. The contrast between the life she had built and the tragedy that unfolded inside her home served as a stark reminder of how quickly safety can be stripped away when the wrong person is allowed in. Friends and family continued to grapple with the emotional aftermath. They realized that Emily's desire to trust and connect, qualities that had always made her so vibrant and compassionate, had been exploited in the cruelest way. They spoke openly about the importance of boundaries, the need to verify the intentions of those entering one's life, and the dangers of ignoring subtle warning signs. In their mourning, they turned her story into advocacy, emphasizing awareness and education to prevent similar tragedies. Emily's story also shed light on the psychological tactics of predators. Lucas had used charm, attention, and fabricated vulnerability to create emotional dependency. By isolating her from friends and family and exploiting her desire for love, he had ensured that Emily's judgment was clouded at critical moments. Each act of manipulation seemed small at the time, but cumulatively they dismantled her defenses and left her vulnerable. Understanding this pattern became essential for law enforcement, psychologists, and community members trying to prevent future victims. Despite the horror of the crime, Emily's story sparked meaningful conversation. Support groups and online communities began discussing red flags in relationships, warning signs of manipulation, and the importance of maintaining independence and personal boundaries even when emotions run high. While nothing could undo the tragedy, her death became a catalyst for awareness, helping others recognize the subtle ways predators can infiltrate lives. Lucas Hawthorne, when eventually apprehended, faced charges that included murder, fraud, and multiple counts of manipulation against prior victims. His capture brought some closure, but it could not erase the pain left behind. Emily's family, while relieved that he could no longer harm others, remained haunted by the knowledge that their loved one had been so thoroughly deceived. The community, too, struggled to reconcile the reality that danger could lurk behind the most familiar and seemingly trustworthy faces. Ultimately, Emily Carter's story serves as a powerful reminder that even the most cautious, intelligent, and independent individuals are not immune to manipulation. Her life was taken because trust was weaponized against her, because subtle red flags were ignored, and because predators often operate behind a facade of charm and sincerity. While her death was tragic and senseless, the lessons she leaves behind continue to resonate. It warns of the dangers of blind trust, emphasizes the importance of vigilance in personal relationships, and highlights the devastating consequences that can occur when love is used as a tool of manipulation. In remembering Emily, her family and community honor not only her life, but also the caution her story offers. It is a warning to look beyond appearances, to question intentions, and to protect oneself, even from those who appear most genuine.
Emily Carter's life may have ended violently, but the lessons she leaves behind endure, a testament to the importance of awareness, self-preservation, and the harsh realities of a world where charm can conceal deadly intentions.
Years after Emily Carter's murder, her story continued to resonate far beyond the small Indiana town where she had lived. Though the initial shock faded from headlines, the impact of her death persisted quietly in conversations, online forums, and community awareness campaigns. Her tragic end had become a case study in the dangers of emotional manipulation and the ways predators exploit trust, particularly in relationships. It was a stark reminder that charm can mask danger, and that even intelligent, independent individuals are vulnerable when deception is carefully executed. Emily's family carried the weight of grief with a mix of sorrow and determination. They refused to let her death be in vain, speaking to friends, community groups, and local organizations about the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships. Her parents emphasized the need for vigilance and honesty, urging others to trust their instincts and question behaviors that seem controlling, invasive, or inconsistent. In their advocacy, they highlighted the subtle manipulations that had ensnared Emily, hoping that awareness could prevent similar tragedies. The case also spurred interest in the psychological tactics used by predators like Lucas Hawthorne. Experts explained how manipulation often begins subtly, through charm, attention, and feigned vulnerability, before escalating to isolation, emotional control, and, in extreme cases, violence. Emily's story became a cautionary example of how love and trust can be weaponized, demonstrating that victims are often aware something feels wrong, but are unable to fully act until it is too late. Analysts emphasized that manipulation is rarely obvious at first, and that the patterns leading to victimization can unfold rapidly and invisibly. Online communities took up Emily's story as a teaching tool. Forums and discussion boards filled with narratives of similar experiences, confessions, and warnings. Women shared their near misses and discussed how easy it was to be charmed while overlooking warning signs. Posts dissected Lucas's behaviors, highlighting tactics like emotional dependency, isolation from support networks, and calculated displays of anger or remorse. In this way, Emily's death became a reference point, educating others about the subtle but dangerous signs of predatory relationships. Law enforcement agencies also examined the case to understand patterns of predation. Lucas Hawthorne's history revealed multiple victims across different states, many of whom had been defrauded, emotionally manipulated, or coerced into dangerous situations. Emily's murder provided critical insights into the escalation from manipulation to violence, informing training protocols for detectives and social workers. Her case demonstrated that seemingly ordinary interactions could conceal long-term planning and intent, making vigilance and early intervention essential for prevention. Despite the widespread discussion, the personal loss for Emily's family and friends remained immeasurable. They continued to mourn the life that had been stolen too soon, remembering her kindness, independence, and vibrancy. The knowledge that her trusting nature had been exploited was painful, but it also fueled their advocacy. Each anniversary of her death became a moment for reflection and awareness, reminding the community that the lessons from Emily's life and death were ongoing and relevant. Emily's apartment, once her sanctuary, had been cleared and reassigned, but for those who knew her, it remained a symbol of vulnerability and caution. The place where she had welcomed someone into her life became a silent warning about the risks of misplaced trust. Her story underscored the need for boundaries, verification, and maintaining independence even when hope, love, or desire seem compelling.
Her case also revealed broader societal issues. It highlighted how predators exploit human desires for connection, the lack of public awareness about emotional manipulation, and the gaps in legal systems that allow such individuals to operate with minimal accountability until tragedy occurs. Emily's story illustrated that danger often comes from within environments considered safe, homes, communities, and relationships, rather than from obvious external threats. In remembering Emily Carter, the world acknowledges both her life and the caution her story imparts. Her tragedy is a lesson in trust, vigilance, and the dark potential that can hide behind charm. While her death was irreparable, the awareness it created continues to protect others. Emily's story emphasizes the importance of listening to instincts, questioning inconsistencies, and maintaining personal boundaries. It serves as a stark reminder that even in relationships that feel genuine, safety must remain a priority, and trust should be given cautiously. Ultimately, Emily Carter's legacy is twofold. It mourns a life cut short and celebrates the lessons learned from her experience. Her story continues to warn, educate, and empower, reminding communities and individuals alike that vigilance, awareness, and careful judgment are essential tools for navigating a world where deception can often hide behind the most familiar and seemingly trustworthy faces. Her life may have ended tragically, but the caution her story provides endures, echoing as both warning and lesson for generations to come.
Emily Carter's story did not end with her death. In the months and years that followed, the ripple effects of her tragedy continued to influence those around her and communities far beyond her Indiana hometown. What began as a horrifying personal loss evolved into a broader conversation about trust, vulnerability, and the hidden dangers of manipulation in romantic relationships. Her life, cut tragically short, became a touchstone for education and awareness, and her legacy extended far beyond the confines of the apartment where she had last lived. Emily's family dedicated themselves to keeping her memory alive through advocacy and education. They began speaking at local schools, community centers, and online forums, emphasizing the importance of recognizing behavioral red flags in personal relationships. They stressed the subtlety of manipulative tactics, explaining how predators often operate under the guise of charm, kindness, or apparent vulnerability. Their goal was to ensure that Emily's death could prevent similar tragedies, helping others recognize danger before it became lethal. The online impact of her story was equally profound. Social media and discussion forums became places where survivors of manipulation, financial exploitation, and emotional abuse shared experiences. Many credited Emily's case as a turning point in understanding the patterns of predatory behavior. Threads dissected Lucas Hawthorne's methods, examining how he gained trust, isolated victims from support networks, and escalated control with meticulous timing. Women and men alike began sharing advice on maintaining boundaries, recognizing early warning signs, and seeking help without shame. Emily's tragedy, horrifying as it was, became an essential educational tool in digital communities dedicated to safety and awareness. Law enforcement agencies also studied her case extensively. Her murder became part of training modules for detectives, social workers, and crisis counselors, emphasizing how predators exploit emotional vulnerabilities and social trust. Investigators analyzed every interaction between Emily and Lucas, from his initial approach at the cafe to his ultimate exploitation of her trust. The case revealed patterns that helped authorities understand not only the psychological manipulation involved, but also the practical steps a predator uses to isolate a target. Her death informed protocols for intervention, victim support, and prevention of similar crimes, ensuring that her story could protect others in the future. Emily's story inspired a new wave of public awareness campaigns.
Advocacy groups highlighted the prevalence of love scams and manipulative relationships, encouraging individuals to educate themselves and remain vigilant. Posters, online ads, and educational materials used her story, without sensationalizing it, to convey critical lessons about trust, boundaries, and the hidden signs of manipulation. The campaigns emphasized that intelligence, independence, and caution, while protective, are not foolproof against someone who is highly skilled in deceit. Emily's tragedy, horrifying as it was, became an essential educational tool in digital communities dedicated to safety and awareness. Communities that had once known Emily as a bright, independent young woman began to understand the broader societal lessons her death revealed. Town halls, workshops, and school programs discussed the psychological dynamics of predatory relationships, exploring why even careful individuals can fall victim. Emily's story became a central example of how isolation, emotional vulnerability, and misplaced trust create opportunities for exploitation. People began to talk openly about the importance of maintaining social networks, verifying intentions, and acting quickly when instinct signals danger. For those who knew Emily personally, the grief remained palpable, but it became intertwined with purpose. Friends and family often reflected on her life, remembering her laughter, creativity, and independence. At the same time, they channeled the pain into vigilance and outreach, determined to prevent others from suffering similar fates. Each remembrance of Emily carried dual significance, mourning the loss of a life and honoring it through awareness and protection for others. The legal ramifications of Lucas Hawthorne's actions extended beyond immediate justice. Authorities used his history of manipulation and prior victims to develop improved strategies for detecting patterns of predatory behavior. Emily's murder exposed weaknesses in the system for monitoring repeat offenders, tracking suspicious activity, and identifying potential victims before tragedy struck. Her case became a reference point for policymakers advocating stronger protections for individuals in emotionally vulnerable situations. Emily's legacy, therefore, is both cautionary and transformative. It is a warning about the subtle ways predators exploit trust and vulnerability, and a testament to the power of awareness and education in preventing further harm. Her story illustrates that tragedy often carries lessons beyond its immediate horror, offering the chance to educate, empower, and protect. Even in death, Emily's life continues to shape conversations about safety, trust, and emotional resilience, ensuring that the lessons her experience provides will resonate for years to come. Ultimately, Emily's story is a reminder that vigilance, education, and open dialogue are essential tools in safeguarding oneself against deception. While her life ended violently, the awareness her story generated provides a form of lasting protection. Through advocacy, education, and remembrance, Emily Carter's life and the lessons of her death continue to influence communities, warn the vulnerable, and remind the world that the people we choose to trust can sometimes hide the most dangerous secrets. Her story endures not merely as a tragedy, but as a critical guide for safety, self-awareness, and the careful navigation of human relationships.
Even years after Emily Carter's death, the consequences of her story continued to unfold, affecting not just her family and friends, but also communities far beyond her Indiana hometown. The tragedy had initially shocked everyone who knew her, but over time it became a case study in the psychology of manipulation, the dangers of misplaced trust, and the devastating consequences that can result when warning signs are ignored. Emily's death had been sudden and violent, but its lessons were enduring, reverberating in ways she could never have anticipated. Emily's family remained at the forefront of public awareness. They worked tirelessly to ensure her story was told responsibly, emphasizing education rather than sensationalism. They spoke at schools, universities, and community events about the importance of recognizing early warning signs in relationships. Their message was consistent. Even intelligent, independent individuals can fall victim to manipulation if they are unaware of the tactics predators use. By sharing Emily's experience, they hope to save others from similar fates, turning their grief into a force for prevention and awareness. The broader public also engaged with the story in significant ways. Online communities, discussion forums, and social media groups frequently referenced Emily's experience when discussing love scams or manipulative relationships. Survivors of emotional abuse shared personal stories, noting the parallels between their experiences and what Emily had endured. Many highlighted how predators exploit trust and vulnerability, gradually eroding a person's sense of safety and independence. The discussions reinforced that manipulation is rarely sudden or overt. It is subtle, insidious, and often hides behind charm, attentiveness, and feigned sincerity. Law enforcement professionals continued to study the case as well. Detectives, psychologists, and victim advocates examined every aspect of Lucas Hawthorne's methods, from his initial approach at the cafe to the escalating control in Emily's apartment. Her murder provided critical insights into the stages of manipulation, the psychological impact on victims, and the warning signs that could indicate danger. Agencies incorporated these lessons into training programs, emphasizing the need to educate the public about emotional exploitation, the importance of verifying backgrounds, and the necessity of rapid intervention when patterns of control or abuse emerge. The case also prompted broader discussions about legal protections and societal awareness. Emily's death highlighted gaps in monitoring repeat offenders and tracking individuals with histories of manipulation and fraud. Advocates called for stronger regulations, improved reporting systems, and accessible resources for those who might be targeted by predators. Emily's story became a reference point in conversations about how communities can protect individuals from deception and abuse before situations escalate to violence. Her personal story also influenced mental health awareness campaigns. Psychologists used her case to illustrate how love, trust, and vulnerability intersect with manipulation. Campaigns encouraged individuals to maintain social networks, verify personal relationships, and trust instincts when warning signs appear. Emily's experience became a teaching tool for understanding emotional manipulation, emphasizing that falling victim is not a sign of weakness, but rather a reflection of how expertly some predators exploit human nature. For Emily's friends and family, the grief never fully disappeared, but it became intertwined with purpose. Each anniversary of her death was marked by reflection, education, and advocacy. They worked to ensure her life was remembered not only for the tragedy of its end, but also for the lessons it imparted. Her apartment, once a private sanctuary, became symbolic of both vulnerability and resilience, an enduring reminder of the importance of boundaries, vigilance, and awareness in personal relationships. Lucas Hawthorne's capture and prosecution brought some measure of justice, but the emotional scars left on those who knew Emily remained. His prior victims and their families found recognition in the attention her story received, helping law enforcement identify and prevent further manipulations. Emily's case exposed the broader network of deceit that existed behind his carefully crafted charm, revealing how systematic and deliberate his exploitation had been. Ultimately, Emily Carter's legacy is defined not only by the tragic circumstances of her death, but also by the lessons it continues to provide. Her story warns of the dangers of blind trust, the subtle yet powerful tactics of predators, and the importance of maintaining independence and vigilance even in relationships that appear loving and genuine. It highlights the critical role of awareness, education, and community support in preventing similar tragedies. Her life, though cut short, became a lasting catalyst for change. Emily's story endures as both a warning and a guide, reminding individuals to question intentions, recognize warning signs, and protect themselves from those who would exploit trust and vulnerability.
Through advocacy, education, and public discussion, the memory of Emily Carter continues to influence and protect, ensuring that the lessons of her tragic experience remain relevant and vital for generations to come.